Painted State, a novel by Blaise Hackman. Read by Blaise Hackman. In the beginning came the war. To survive the war, we put on the paint. But the paint did something to us. And so, a new war began. The sun rose over a vast post-apocalyptic desert. In the middle, like a dirty pimple, sat a derelict building. Inside, the gloomy light bled through heavily boarded windows, taped to which were translucent piss-colored plastic sheets smeared with a gluggy lead coating. There was just enough somber yellow glow to discern an old iron bed amongst a staggering mess of junk. Atop its dirty mattress, a conspicuous lump dwelled under a pile of blankets and threadbare sheets. The lump moved, and the sheets parted to reveal a strong male profile. His pale, twitching eyelids snapped open, the dirty black liner and thick creamy filth on his face emphasizing the disturbed look in his eye. As he slowly rose, the sheets peeled from the weird Vaseline all over his torso like a used Band-Aid, revealing the burns and scars that furrowed and clung to his sinewy back like a morbid octopus. He ambled to the other side of the room in his underwear and plonked down on a milk crate. Everything around him screamed temporary. The cracked, greasy mirror, the scuffed wash bowl, bone-dry chip vanity, and the teetering stack of baby wipes. At his feet were a semicircle of worn khaki cans bonded by a military belt. Different colors bled from each, and all were labeled the same: Biohazard. He gazed up at the graffiti emblazoned on the flaky wall. Paint is God. Then out of nowhere came a coughing attack. Nastiness shot from his mouth as he convulsed and wrenched the seal from a nearby water bottle, downing half and emptying the rest into the bowl. Recovered, he groped for a fresh pack of wipes, gutted it, and extracted a huge wad of juice-spewing cleansers. He pawed a grimy stopwatch and set it for 30 seconds. Go. He scrubbed his dial with abnormal vigor, brutally removing the paint, checking the timer frequently, providing occasional glimpses of his exposed face. With 15 seconds left, he was cleaner, more hydrated, more awake. He flung the spent materials at a nearby bin, an overflowing monolith of filthy washers. Reaching down, he clawed the top off the first can, releasing it with a stale gasp. He scraped the bottom and inspected the resulting off-white goop. Not much. He sloshed it in the bowl and then rubbed the nasty, textured dilute all over his mug. As he finished, the watch stopped. It evaded radioactive leaching once again. Big fucking deal. Now he grabbed a makeup pencil and deftly traced a black pattern over the white layer that was beginning to crust over his dirty facial hair, his cracked nose, his fractured soul. He popped the next can and dipped a finger. Yellow. Same story. Stocks were low. He dunked the tip in the milky water and filled his face stencil with the rotten lemony hue. Stage complete, he wiped his fingers and began applying eyeliner. That's when he caught his own gaze in the mirror and stopped. He pulled a picture from the vanity. 2 happy little boys. He studied it for a long time. Then swapped it for a map. A map of a city, with several locations circled and labeled in crayon. Most were crossed out, but his shaky fingers traced a few that were untouched. He dumped the map and grabbed a curious container reminiscent of an egg carton. He flipped it open, picked one of the small white spheres inside, opened his mouth unnaturally wide, and chucked it down the hatch. Then he rose, gagging a little as the bowl dissolved and frothed madly in his mouth. He stepped into some abused, vaguely military overalls and gargled a little more. Next, he stuffed a worn child's blanket down front, zipped up, and spat the excess fizz into the bowl. Now he grabbed his 2 heavy gear cases, makeup in one, food and water in the other, and dumped them by the door. He snapped the lids back on the cans, threw the goop loop over his body, ammo belt style, and plunged his fists deep into a vat of viscous green mucus. A stamp on the side read KVAS. As he pulled his arms out, the ugly gunk made rude sucking noises. With no regard for his surrounds, he flailed his hands violently. Gooey clumps hit the walls until he was left with an appropriate layer of the low-grade translucent shit, enough to deflect the radiation and get him through another equally shitty day. He snatched up the suitcase handles, making one last jizz of gunk on the walls, and exited. Outside, the building baked quietly and pointlessly under the hostile morning sun. The door smashed open, victim of a rude kick. The offender stood there, ragged, scary, holding his precious cases. His paint was Z-grade, but striking nevertheless. Pale yellowish face, black lips, a biohazard logo hanging over his left eye like a festering mango. He glanced around twitchily for a few seconds. No threats. Good. Apart from the whole fucking world being radioactive. He threw his gear in his shitbox car, tacked his boy's picture to the dashboard, and set off. The old bomb crossed the vast, dead, empty world. Inside, he endured the mobile oven, sweating heavily through his barely adequate protection as he observed the occasional clusters of bodies dotting the bleak landscape. Bleached ones, dried ones, some still shrieking through their faded makeup. He warily rolled his ride to silent rest amongst broken cars in the abandoned city, then cross-referenced his map with a nearby building. Satisfied, he reached in back for a bat adorned with a nasty array of spikes and exited the car. Once inside the dead space, he noticed a collage on the wall. He approached it and scanned the faces of the happy children staring back from under the dust, revealing the place this used to be. Joyous. Then, his old life flashed before him. He saw two boys laughing and wrestling with a man at a campground. Him. Vanessa, his wife, sat outside their massive motorhome nearby, rolling her eyes, trying to read a book. Then he saw visions of speed, water, fiberglass. He was on a jet ski, darting around his swimming family. Vanessa was screaming at him. He was screaming back at her. Then he was at the opening of an art gallery, hanging back, drinking beer, watching Vanessa socialize. She sipped champagne, shooting him a disapproving look. Then he was back at home, channel surfing. Vanessa appeared and lingered in her nightie to see a report on the impending war. He quickly switched to a story on the manned Mars landing. I was watching that, she said curtly. Drunkenly, he stabbed the controller, reverting to the newsreader. Relations between the US and North Korea continue to decline as they try to broker peace in the wake of the Seoul attack. Vanessa talked with deep dismay. People starving around the globe and trillions wasted looking for microbes on a dead planet. Microbes mean oil. Oil is taking us to war. Oil brings the champagne that fuels your shitty attitude as you dwell in galleries, judging others, yet doing nothing. Visibly hurt, she struck back with final venom. That fucking job's changed you. And she exited. That's when he found himself back in the daycare. He focused on the collage again and scanned it forensically. With no familiar faces, he gloomily departed. Midday, and he sat outside another lifeless child care facility, listlessly chewing on an old sandwich, looking far into nothing. He was a poorly painted shadow of a man. From deep behind his 1,000-mile stare came the noise of an approaching swarm. Slow. Ascending. Disconcerting. He blinked. It stopped. But something else was coming. He grabbed his things and scurried into the rubble. Now he watched like a worried rat through a shattered window as a convoy of intimidating beings passed by, all with their own unique dress and face paint. Like him. He extracted the tattered child's blanket from his overalls and held it hard as he sucked in breaths and battled for control. "Don't see me," he mouthed. Finally, the strange cavalcade disappeared, and he slumped with relief. Dan was briefly startled by the Harlan-esque face staring back at him, before realizing it was his own reflection in a shard of glass. He touched his face and gazed at the residue on his fingertips for a very long time. Enough wondering, he thought, and left. The bedraggled figure held his map, looking puzzled at the barbed wire fence and locks of the building before him. Above it was a sign that read, "Bam Bam Daycare." He clutched his bat once again and headed through the front door. Inside, he was instantly hit by the smell and chaos. Upturned furniture, jagged cans seeping rotten food, soiled utensils, strands of toilet paper everywhere, strewn between old kids' toys. Every window was cased with iron bars and radiation shielding. Every surface bore insane finger art. Under the mayhem, the seemingly ubiquitous photo collage. This time the joyful faces even more distorted by nuclear exposure. Among them, his children. He called for them. "Boys!" He ran through a nearby door. His call moved from urgent to frantic. "Boys!" Then he saw the large word smeared across the wall. Asylum. Cautiously, he pulled the car into the pool of foreboding light, emitting from an upper floor window of an old Victorian-era building clad in radiation deflection. Parking between a school bus and a flatbed truck, he grasped his bat more firmly than he could remember and headed toward the entrance. Creeping through the bleak lobby, he spied stairs that yawned at him like a gate to hell. Nevertheless, he ascended. At the first floor landing, he saw familiar light spilling through swinging doors further along the hallway. He slinked down the dim corridor and peered through one of the porthole windows. What he saw was the back of a very tall man, wearing a lab coat, attached to which was a spidery array of strange tubes. The man's ears pricked, as if he sensed something. He turned to reveal his incredibly pallid makeup and the ghoulishly made-up dozing baby he was bottle-feeding. The tall man gave a warm smile and casually beckoned the newcomer inside. The visitor edged in, bat ready, as the tall man placed the child in a deep steel crib. The tall man addressed his guest in a cultured English accent. "That weapon won't be necessary, friend, I assure you," and extended his hand. "My name is Sage." The interloper reciprocated by slowly lowering his weapon. "I'm here to find my kids."